We are joined on this episode by a filmmaker, a writer, director, cinematographer, editor, a Renaissance man, I think we can say, a Bay Area native, a Chapman University graduate who's directed short films including Warm Insides and The Party. And you can check out his most recent project, the feature film Rot, streaming now on Amazon Prime. He is Andrew Merrill. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us on the program here, sir.
Thank you for such a nice, beautiful intro. I don't even know if I deserve all of that. That was very nice. I did do all of that, but it sounds better when you say it.
Just stating facts.
I think it's very well deserved, Andrew. And I, just for guest note, so that they know, I met Andrew way back in film school days at Chapman University. And it's always such a pleasure to reconnect with classmates. And it's especially a pleasure when you can see your classmates that were good people that you actually liked hanging out with, being on set with. It's fun to see them actually succeed and go on to do cool things, especially in the genre world, which I love. So I'm super stoked to be talking with you.
Well, I know I'm so happy to be here. So happy that you reached out. Very excited.
Cool. And I didn't know you guys went that far back. That's very far. What we like to do a lot of times with the guests is, first off, before we jump into everything, is ask kind of what gave you the bug. Was there a piece of pop culture or a film or TV show or something that really made you think like, I think I want to be a filmmaker and or go to film school?
Yeah. In high school, freshman year of high school, I got the bug to make films. I don't know why, but it was just something that one day I just woke up and I knew I want to direct movies. And I honestly do not remember why that was. It was just one day I was like, someone asked me, they were like, so what do you want to be, when you grow up? And this was like freshman orientation. And I said, I want to direct movies. And I don't think I'd ever vocalized that before. And then from that day on, I have been pursuing directing, and that sounds so weird and vague, but that's the story. And actually the guy who asked me, he's in LA and he's also pursuing a career in the film industry. So we're all down here. And in high school, I bought a secondhand camera and started writing scripts and kind of harassed my friends into helping me film a feature film, which we did not complete. We only got about 45 minutes edited together. But, the techniques that I used in high school, scheduling, reaching out to actors, coordinating with crew, finding locations, all of that I still do to this day. And actually on Rot, we even used a wheelchair as a dolly, just like I did back in high school. So, some things never change. But yeah, I filmed basically as much as possible in high school because I loved what drew me to filmmaking was the visual aspect. I loved telling a story with camera angles and depth of field and lighting. And it wasn't until college that I started focusing more on the writing aspect and sound design and kind of broadening my toolkit as a filmmaker. And yeah, I guess that's the story. It's pretty simple. I wish that I could have a smoother answer for that.
No, I think it's the real answer, which is the best one. And I do think, something you said is really important, that once you start vocalizing an intention or saying, I am a filmmaker, or I am a writer, or I want to be those things, it definitely takes on a new meaning and helps kind of reorient yourself. So I do find a lot of filmmakers struggle to even call themselves a filmmaker because they don't feel like they're legitimate yet. So I think that's a really important thing to talk about in some ways, is just like the power of being able to vocalize that.
Well, I think what clued me in early on was that if I was doing film, I could work for 10 hours, even in high school, and not feel it. It didn't feel like work to me ever, even though it took a lot of energy and a lot of time. And I just knew, I was like, okay, there's something here where I can sit down and edit the footage that I shot. That took me all weekend long, and every single night during the week. I'm not playing video games or, reading books or anything else. I'm just editing, and I'm always surprised when I look up and it's 11 p.m. So I always look at that as like, oh, you're where you're supposed to be when it feels like play.
Oh, I totally know what you mean. I've read some interesting books about that too, where they call it flow, whenever you should kind of maximize your life around enabling yourself to experience as much flow as possible. And it's exactly that. It's like when you don't even think about like eating or drinking, when you don't notice the passage of time, you're just kind of in this other almost meditative state doing what you enjoy. So that makes perfect sense to me. I'm curious, did you have certain artists or filmmakers that really inspired you in high school and kind of influenced your draw towards visual design?
Oh, absolutely. It's Steven Spielberg. I know a lot of people say that. It was one of those where in high school, it was kind of like connecting the dots. I was like, oh, I love Minority Report, and I love Catch Me If You Can, and I love Jurassic Park, and I love E.T., and I love Indiana Jones, and oh, they're all made by the same person? And I basically did a deep dive in Spielberg, and that shaped me very early on, somewhat to my detriment, because it was hard. I judged other films that weren't either at that level financially as a production, or just did things that I thought stylistically looked sloppy compared to the style that Spielberg had perfected by that time. And it took a while. I mean, that's part of the reason that people go to film school, is you meet other people with different tastes and outlooks, and you watch movies together and discuss it. And over the years, you broaden your palette. But I still think Spielberg, I mean, it's not shocking to say that he is a master, but I look back at what he does with the camera, and he makes it look so seamless. But even, I was watching Jurassic Park the other day, and he'll start on a close-up of the monitor as the fences start failing and the alarm's going off. And then the camera pulls back and racks focus to Samuel L. Jackson, who's like, what the hell? And then pulls back again and rack focuses to a third person. And then the camera turns and racks to another. And it's like, it's all in one shot, and it's so smooth and seamless and conveys that sense of urgency. And you can get that from the camera movement. And I feel like that is my driving goal as a filmmaker, is I want to maintain the visual storytelling aspect. And I feel like that's kind of a lost art these days. I feel like a lot of people are, maybe filming costs so much money that, time is just more valuable than designing these intricate shots. But I always, every day after filming Rot, when we just filmed a wide shot and then got into close-ups, I always felt so disappointed with myself. And every day that we got a creative shot in, I just left set beaming. I just felt so good.
I can definitely relate to that. You find yourself sometimes in the heat of the moment on set when you're pushed for time and budget. It's like you end up going with kind of like the very standard wide shot, medium shot, close up, back and forth. And you're like, man, this isn't what I envisioned for myself. Yeah. And now with the way productions are, that the budgets are tighter, the schedules are shorter, it's much more difficult to do the same level of filmmaking. But
or on these big budget films.
Yeah.
I'm not going to name any names, but where they previs the whole movie before the director even is brought on. And like, I don't, there's something so sterile about that. I don't know. That's not why I go to the movies.
No, but I appreciate that you referenced later Spielberg. I think his 2000s run is so underappreciated because of how great his 70s, 80s, and 90s runs were. But his 1-2 punch of what you said, Minority Report and Catch Me If You Can, only rivaled by his other 1-2 punch of 1993 being Schindler's List and Jurassic Park. I think the guy, he does get a lot of love on the show, thankfully. There's not too many film snobs that have jumped on here and shat on Spielberg. We've actually had a few guests that are very influenced by him, and it's good to hear. I'd mentioned that you do a little bit of everything. You've been a cinematographer, and thank you for understanding, just to the masses here, that cinematography is more than just pink lighting or filters. That's what I think passes as cool cinematography to film Twitter nowadays. When it's a lot more than that. It's like you said, building tension through camera movement. It's angles. It's all of that put into it to create a mood, a feeling, exactly what you want the audience to feel.
And then if you can do all of that on top of planning the shots so that they flow seamlessly into one another, you've reached a level of filmmaking that almost nobody achieves. And I don't want to lead the listeners astray. I was a cinematographer out of necessity, and I love being a cinematographer. However, by calling myself a cinematographer, I feel like puts me on the same level of people who are actually cinematographers and know what they're talking about. And I feel like I just kind of am economical, I guess, as a cinematographer. I can do it, and I can make the image look nice, but I don't. There's a difference between, and digital is kind of even the playing field here, but there's a difference between people who are true cinematographers and they know the technical side on the back of their hands and can speak that language. I couldn't tell you how many lumens, I can barely use a light meter. So digital, you can fake it till you make it, I guess. So yeah, I just wanted to say that there are so many cinematographers that I respect way too much to even though I've done it, I don't want to claim that totally as a label.
Well, no, I mean, just because Jimi Hendrix existed doesn't mean he can't pick up a guitar. Just like Becky said earlier, it's calling yourself the filmmaker and the writer and all those things. It helps get you to it. And you say you did out of necessity, but still you have several credits, for it, including a TV series. So I'm saying you're a cinematographer. You may not be the Jimi Hendrix of it, but that doesn't mean you can't. You don't know a lot more than most folks listening.
I mean, I have definitely shot things where I am really proud of what I was able to accomplish. And, there was one year where I challenged myself to make a short film every month. But when you're writing, producing, the cinematographer, the location scout, the casting director, the director, the editor, the colorist, I ended up only doing a film every other month. And this one year was so important to my filmmaking journey because I did a different genre and different style for every short film. And by the end of the year, I made something that was so close to what I had in my head. And it was the first time in my life that I thought of a story, wrote it down, and then cast it and shot it. And then when I could show people, I could be like, yes, that's what I saw. And it took a whole year of making these short films. And it took, 15 years of actually filming on a regular basis to get to that point where I could achieve that look. And what I shot that day, for that short film that weekend, I consider beautiful images. I really am proud of it. But yeah, no, I'll take the compliment. I've been a cinematographer and I've produced images that I'm proud of. That's all I'll say.
So let's go back, to the 15 years of your various filmmaking experiences. I want to dive into film school a little bit. You talked a little bit about kind of the bridge from high school to film school. I'm curious, was the film school experience what you expected? Did anything surprise you about it? Like maybe you didn't expect it to operate in the way that it did. Like some people are like, oh, I expected to make a lot more films, or I didn't expect to learn so much about XYZ part of the business.
I had been filming pretty regularly and working with cameras by the time I got to film school. So I feel like film school was what I expected. It was the next step up. In high school, I actually got a mentor in high school. He was just a kid a few years older than me who was interested in film. And he was one of those guys that is very technical. And so he always pushed me to never be satisfied with mediocrity. Like if we have time, get another take. I was doing live filming every single week. So when I got to film school, I guess the biggest surprise for me was that there were people there that had never touched a camera before, that had never made anything before. And I at the time I saw it as laziness, but I think now, maybe some of it was financial. And I don't want to judge anyone who didn't have the opportunities I had. But for those who got into film, I guess, because they thought it would be fun and easy, I think a lot of those people have dropped out or changed careers by now. Film school, I loved Chapman. I loved going to Chapman. I loved hanging out at the film building. I feel like I lived there. I was the kid that would edit until 3 a.m. and then trudge back to the dorm. And I worked on the upperclassmen films every weekend, trying every single position I could that was available to me. And I really got a lot out of college. I understand it's not for everyone, and for the amount of money it cost, I probably could have just made movies and learned just as much or learned other skills. But I think for my personality, especially at that time, I was a very introverted, shy person, especially freshman year of college. And Chapman did a good job of kind of baby steps, getting you into bigger and bigger productions. And I think that's exactly the kind of learning style that I needed at the time. I needed to do the visual storytelling 101 as a freshman. I needed to work on other people's productions as a grip, as an AD, as a script supervisor, as a producer. And I needed that intermediate. I needed that advanced. I needed to then build up to the senior thesis. And I really, by the end of college, was still that kind of shy, introverted person. However, right out of college, my roommate came to me and was like, hey, there's a festival, the New York Television Festival, and their submissions close in 2 weeks for the television program. We probably should have made a short, and submitted it. And it was like, well, we're all unemployed. We're right out of college. Let's make a TV pilot and send it into them. And I was able, through everything I had learned at Chapman, to pull a crew together with everyone that we went to school with that were also unemployed. We found locations and wrote the script in a day. And it was literally, we said, let's make a TV pilot. And I think it was either 3 or 4 days later, we were filming. We filmed for 3 days. And this wasn't like a mumblecore, we had many different locations up in Culver, down in Orange. We rented props, and then I sat and edited it, and we basically made a 22-minute pilot and submitted it in 2 weeks. And it was at that moment where I realized how everything I had learned in college came together in order for me to be able to pull that off. So there are people that are definitely like, film school is not necessary, and they're probably right. For me, I needed everything I learned and all of the experience on set to make me feel confident and comfortable enough to go, I can do this, and then do it.
Yeah, I got a similar experience out of Chapman as you, I think. For me, I definitely spent a lot of high school fumbling around with my own films, but I think it really helped me kind of up my game and be challenged by other people's craft too, and get the experience of working with others as opposed to solely relying on myself to do just about everything. But at the same time, I still make movies where I'm doing just about everything, as you can probably relate to, but that's more out of budget and practicality than it is a desire to truly be a one-person show.
Well, and I have a question for you. Are there classes that you wished you had taken, or like things that you wished you had done in school?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it kind of leads up to my next question to you too. I would say I wish I had probably been on more sets than I was, just because I did work a lot. And I think a part of it too was also just like working part-time, and on top of like working 12 hours a day on weekends on film sets. It was sometimes tough to do all those things together while also doing the rest of your, undergrad education. So that I do have some regrets there, but I do feel like some of the business elements of filmmaking.
Yes.
I didn't get a lot of classes or exposure to that. And I don't know if it was even offered, but that is kind of one of my next questions for you. Do you wish there were things that, that would have better prepared you for the realities of entering the film industry, of like, how do you put together like a realistic budget? How do you get financing for your film? What is your perspective on that?
Oh my God, I have so many thoughts. I was just talking about this the other day, because I was lamenting, there are people that have started production companies. I know that I need to do that, but I do not have a strong business sense. And I feel like producing class and some sort of, law or a financial class all should have been mandatory. And you kind of got that in one of the most valuable classes that I ever took at Chapman, but it wasn't, I don't even remember if it was mandatory or not, because I don't know if everyone I went to school with took it, but it was production management. And reflecting now, I'm like, I'm going to back up. Your last question, if there was something that surprised me about film school, I think that I thought at the time that it was going to be focusing on evolving my creative skills. And really, film school worked on the technical side. And that has really come in handy outside of college, because just this one class, production management, taught you how to schedule a film, budget a film, and everything that goes into getting a project up and running. And that has been the number one skill that I have used outside of school, because just sitting down and going, okay, I've written the script and spent so much time on this thing, knowing how to take that script, break it down into some sort of schedule so you can kind of figure out at least a ballpark of what something is going to cost is the number one hurdle to actually starting the production, at least in my opinion. There are so many people that write scripts and they don't even think of filming them. And, I write a script and then break down, okay, how many days do I think this is going to take? How many crew members do I need to get? What are my locations? Do I need to get permits? Are there costumes involved? And just start writing all of this stuff down. It's suddenly, it makes it seem achievable. Suddenly you're like, okay, I see the building blocks here of what I need to get in line in order to start actually filming. And that's something that I don't think people realize when they go to film school. They go to film school and they're like, oh, we're going to learn about different techniques and we're going to write screenplays and, we're going to be signed by an agency right as we graduate. And really, no one wants to hire you right outside of college, and you better be making your own stuff. And I wish that I had understood that a little bit more, that it is going to be on my shoulders to actually make a career for myself. I have to be actively making short films, music videos, features, whatever. I have to actively be making those myself. I cannot wait around for someone to do it for me. And that partly goes into why I learned editing. I learned cinematography. I learned producing because I needed to. I couldn't wait around for someone to be like, hey, I have a script. Do you want to direct it? I just had to go and write. I had to go in and start the ball. I had to call people. I had to figure out how to set up casting, websites and listings. And I wish that school helped a little bit more on the business side and the producing side. And I wish I had made way more friends with producers. I didn't make enough friends with producers. That's all I'll say.
Becky, it sounds like you were asking that question because you wanted confirmation for those thoughts as well. Is that true?
Oh, maybe just a little bit. But yeah, that's, I think the things Andrew's saying it's pretty consistent with what other guests are saying too, is that there's such a big hurdle in terms of the actual business component of it. And then this stark reality of nobody's going to come knocking at your door unless you're going out and making things happen for yourself. You're making connections. You're making content that people notice. Nothing will happen. Otherwise, there's not people just waiting to scoop up film students. So I think it's a good reinforcement of that.
Three of our production partners are Full Sail alums, myself included, and all of what you were both saying was the same kind of feeling we had. They had you put hands on equipment. It was very much technical side. Classes were even divided up, like there'd be lighting, then there'd be screenwriting, then there'd be this and this, until you finally made a couple of projects. But I'm kind of with you guys. It goes back to that adage you hear people say, like, man, they don't teach you in high school how to write a check or do your taxes or anything adult. You have to do that when you get outside. Film school, it sounds like, is the same way. And it's funny that Andrew even said, I wish I'd have just taken that money and made a film. I feel like the Tarantino generation forward to now, I've been hearing that, and I've even said that to kids too. Some kids, ask me, should I go to Full Sail like you did? I'm like, no. If you have that much money, make something. Just your reel is so much more important than that degree, honestly, with film. It's not like you're getting jobs in academia where they're like, you need a bachelor's or you need a master's. It's what can you do? And thankfully, yes, Full Sail did get me jobs like Andrew with like touching equipment. I knew how to do grip work. I knew how to step in and do other swing positions and stuff. But it's kind of light on film theory. It's not like the 70s where that George Lucas generation all were USC kids and maybe they were getting lectures from the directors before them. It was not heavy on that. It was a similar thing I think a lot of these film schools do. But would you argue, though, both of you, I guess, but mostly Andrew, what is the networking the reason? I mean, I would never take back any of my Full Sail experience because obviously some of my partners are working with me to this moment. The networking that you make there, and hopefully you find people like you found Andrew also making films here, years later. I think that's the reason we probably think it's all worth the while in the long run.
The networking is huge. Like it is hard to downplay that. There was a guy who went to a community college near Chapman and then worked on Chapman student film sets on the weekend. So he was getting the same sort of hands-on education that we were, because, Chapman students, they didn't care if the person didn't go to Chapman. Like, oh, you want to grip? You want to be on camera? You want to do AC work? Like, hell yeah, come on in. And, then you make connections that way. And I actually, the last 2 jobs I've gotten were from connections at Chapman. So yeah, the networking is huge. I also think that it's hard for parents to wrap their, like if I went to my parents, however old I was, impossibly young, and went, the money that you're going to give to Chapman, give to me and I will film something. I don't think they would have done it. And I don't think, like even now, like when I went to make a feature film, I was talking to my parents and explaining like, yeah, it's going to cost a lot of money. And how I was like, this is kind of like grad school for me. I'm spending this money because I'm investing in myself. And my parents were like, well, but like, why don't you actually just go to grad school instead? And I went, I think that this is a better use of my money. I think that going to grad school, it's not like engineering. No one cares that you have, a master's degree in film production, or a PhD. Unless you're doing film studies, I don't think it really matters. But like I think a lot of parents that aren't connected to the industry or don't know the industry that well, they don't quite get how it works. Like my mom's biggest fear is that I would like be a freelancer for the rest of my life. And I had to be like, well, Mom, that's kind of how it is. Like there is no regular 9-to-5 job in the film industry. It doesn't exist unless you're in the studio, not making movies. You're just, you're the executive kind. That's something different. I just want to say, I am so sorry that I'm like stammering and fumbling over words. You know what? I thought that being on a podcast and talking about myself would be easy. It is much harder than just talking about movies. Did I end up answering your question? Sometimes I black out and my mouth is just moving.
You did.
Yeah, you're
okay,
fine.
good.
Trust me, you're fine.
We're just, we turn the podcast into an indictment of the film school system. So, since college and before your feature, you also wrote and directed several short films. How would you kind of compare the experience of creating those films compared to those that you did make in college? How was the progression, I guess, or the way you went about it?
Well, in college, I only wrote my Visual 101 scripts and I wrote my intermediate script, and they were very bad. They were really bad. And then I was fortunate enough to meet my friend Clay Keller. He currently runs Screen Drafts, the Screen Drafts podcast. Sorry to plug another podcast on your podcast. He's a
we do it all the time. We love to do it.
And he was interested in writing comedy scripts, and he's so good at it. And so I actually found myself in college. My advanced production and my senior thesis were both his screenplays, and were kind of more comedy centric, which does line up with my personality. I like to have humor in my projects. But it was outside of college. We did 2 more independent TV pilots together, and then I really was feeling the itch to do something different. And so I kind of sat down and wrote for the first time in a very long time, because I had a very low opinion of my writing ability. And part of the reason was that I didn't realize that my process was different than Clay's, or many other people. They could sit down and just write. and it would come out and be like 80% there. My process is I write and it's like 30-40% there. And then I just have to rewrite and get feedback and rewrite. And I started to figure this out a few years outside of college, that I just needed to do more drafts. And that was just what I needed to do in order to get the script to a decent place. I still think, I would love to get people writing scripts for me, because just like cinematography, if you are a screenwriter and that is what you do, you are going to be much better at it than I am. I love writing. I love cinematography. I love editing, but I really want to just focus on directing, but I wrote out of necessity. And as soon as I started writing for myself in order to film these short films, I felt my confidence growing. I was more creative. I was writing weird scripts. When you're not like working with someone and you can just be like, ooh, this girl thinks that there's a worm creature inside of her and she's, trying to dig it out, and, you turn to someone else and they're like horrified by this thought. When it's just you can go out and do it. And I did. It's called Warm Insides, and it got into Fantastic Fest. And it's like, as soon as I was understanding of what I needed to do in order to produce the best work, that significantly just helped me develop as a filmmaker. And so that was the biggest thing, was feeling like I was free to explore different genres and different styles in order to find what my style was. And I still don't think like I could intelligently explain my style. Like famous filmmakers, you can talk all day about Scorsese or Spielberg or Quentin Tarantino and like describe what makes their films their films. So maybe I'm still figuring out what an Andrew Merrill film feels like. But I think that all of the short films and all of the projects I worked on outside of college, that was when I really started to figure out what that meant. Whereas in college, it was like learning how to ride the bike for the first time. Oh, I've never used a dolly before. Oh, I've never shot film before. Oh, I'm not used to working with a 15-person crew with extras and having to manage all of that. Outside of college, once you have those skills, then you can turn back to the creative. And looping back to the earlier question, college, figuring out the technical side, outside of college, having that technical skill, and then being able to look within and find out, well, what do I bring to the table? Like why? And that's the big thing, right? Like why would someone want to watch an Andrew Merrill movie? Why would someone want to watch a Becky Sayers movie? It's like outside of college is when you start to go, well, who am I? And who do I want to be as an artist? And even just being able to say artist, which took many years for me to be able to say and not feel like I was being snooty. Cause I never went in thinking of myself as an artist or that filmmaking was an art form. I thought I used every word that you would use to describe art except for art. Cause I just couldn't handle it. So I think, all of my projects outside of college were helping me find out who I was as a filmmaker.
I think you beautifully led into my next question. It's
yes.
Like you knew where I was going. Because I want to talk about how those films really prepared you for ROT in a way. So it sounds like there's a lot of creative exploration, kind of identifying yourself, finding your own style and sensibilities as an artist. Did the short films also help kind of prepare you in other ways in terms of expanding your collaborator network that you would later rely on for your feature?
I'm trying to, I'm now like looking back at who worked on the feature and who worked on the short films. Yes and no. In terms of my collaborators, it's funny. ROT had me reaching out to people at Chapman And they would then point me to other Chapman people that I was like, oh my God, yeah, I do know them. But I like hadn't thought of them in a decade. And I forgot that they did sound design or they did this. And so that's kind of where the Chapman networking came through. I'm not liking this answer. Hold on. Let me think about this for a second. That's a good question, though.
We can also take it from a different angle, like not even just from a collaborator perspective. I guess one other way to look at it is, how did your short films prepare you for the road? You know, you're making your first feature.
I can definitely answer this one. All right. So I think one of the biggest things that I have learned is that if you just start the process of reaching out to people and inquiring if they want to work on the project, suddenly the project becomes real. And I've used that technique, and I've also used the technique of just lying to myself. Like, oh, it's going to be easy and it's going to cost very little money. Both of those are how I make projects. Every short film, as soon as I reached out to one person and was like, hey, here's the script. This is what I'm thinking. Like, are you free around this date? And if they said yes, suddenly I'm like, oh, shoot. Now I actually have to like pull everything together so that I don't let this person down, or that I don't have to reach out to them and be like, oh yeah, no, never mind. We're not filming, actually. I hate that. Once I set a plan, I like to do it. And so I did that, and I sat down with an old Chapman buddy that had sound designed a couple of projects of mine. And I told him, I've been making a lot of short films over the last couple of years, and I totaled them up. And they equal the length of a feature film. So like, why can't I just make a bunch of short films that are all telling the same story and then edit it together and it's a feature film? Like, it was so like such a thin excuse for making a feature film. And I was like, it'll probably cost under $10,000, because all of my short films were made for a couple $100 each, feeding the crew and getting a couple of bulbs and some China balls, and that was it. And I convinced myself, like, oh, I'll just treat Rot like a series of short films. I'll keep my day job. I'm not going to quit, and I'll film the movie on weekends. And we're going to make this feature film over a couple of months, and it'll be easy. It'll be just like making a bunch of short films. And this was the lie I told myself. I didn't think it was a lie at the time. And that is how I made the movie, is I believed it. I believed that if I guess I did make a feature film, so I guess it wasn't totally a lie, but I also had a friend make a feature right before me, but he did not like make a schedule. They just filmed, during their free time. And so filming went on for years. And I went, okay, I'm going to learn from that, and I'm going to schedule this thing out so carefully and film it all every weekend over the span of 3 months. And so I sat down and started writing a script that took place in locations that I thought I could get. Apartments, the side of a street, places like that. And then I had like one big location that I'd be like, okay, I'm going to I'll spend the money for that big location and then pepper it throughout the script, so that I can get some production value in there. And I sat down and I kind of started with an idea like, oh, what would happen if my roommate just up and left the apartment and just didn't come back? Like, what would I do? What would I do in that situation? And that was like, oh, I'm kind of intrigued to follow this thread. So I wrote the script, and I, through draft after draft after draft, kind of pinpointed like, okay, there are these scenes that, randomly take place somewhere completely different. Like, I should cut those out or, move them to locations that I already have. And it wasn't quite as sterile, I guess. It was, I wasn't actively thinking about that all the time, but I was like, okay, I'm not going to write a scene where there's 15 police cars. I know I can't afford that. So let's pare it down. Maybe it's just 2 cops come in. Maybe it's just a person calling the cops and the cops never show up. And once I got the script down, I scheduled it out. And before I cast anyone, I knew exactly what days I would need them, and basically said, hey, if you're available these days, you have the part. And this is an oversimplification because We spent 6 months meeting people, and I think we had like 6 callbacks of the 3 leads. So it was a long process. There was a lot of effort that went into this. But I think one of the smartest things I did was I went to every actor, every crew member, and I had all of the dates, and I never changed the dates. We switched around some scenes for filming, but for the most part, every single day was exactly the day that I said, and we filmed what I needed to film that day. And we started filming and went through for 3 months, and I worked a day job. And so I was basically working every single day, probably for like 6 months, and treating it in my mind as a series of short films helped it seem manageable. And I think that's the number one thing that I learned is filmmaking is really scary, but if you just take it one step at a time and make it seem possible, and you just start off on the path, you'll probably make it to the end.
So that's certainly an interesting way to go about it, and we've heard kind of similar methods from a few other indie filmmakers. We did want to ask specifically, how did you finance this film? Was it just fully self-financed? Was it a financed as you go, considering you were doing it in a weekend manner?
Well, yes, it was partly financed as you go along. However, I'm the kind of person that I'll be like, ooh, I need to buy a laptop. And then I'll spend 9 years thinking about buying a laptop. I guess I've lived in the same apartment for 8 years. So rent is dirt cheap. I saved up a bunch of money. Because I don't spend a lot of money on myself. My parents were nice enough to, write me a check. And basically by the end of filming, the only money in my bank account was the amount of money that they had written me a check for. So I kind of looked at that as like a little bit of a cushion, a safety net, which I am, it wasn't a lot, but it was enough to make me feel comfortable. I could, go out and film another weekend if I needed to. I think one of the big things was that I just kept working. I never took time off from work. My steady 9 to 5 paycheck was continually coming in every 2 weeks. So that helped on top of what I had in my bank account. But yeah, it was very scary because I totaled it up, and my budget I was under, because I budgeted almost everything except for post-production. Like, I don't think there was anything in there for visual effects. There was nothing in there for color correction. And there was nothing in there really for sound design, because I just was like, I'll do it myself and save the money. And there was nothing in there for editing, even though there was going to be an editor, and then he actually got a paying gig and I had to edit it myself. But yeah, I budgeted it up, and it was expensive. I think my original budget, which was low, was like $60,000. And that was paying the crew, and then most actors and other crew members were deferred pay. So, obviously I wasn't paying myself either or anything. So it was a huge amount to me. I was, from someone who I stress about spending $50, spending that amount of money, I honestly, looking back, I don't even know how I pulled the trigger. And we started buying hard drives, and I bought a big hard drive. And so we had spent a couple $1,000s, and we got to the first day of filming, and it just was not working. And I was like, I have to shut this thing down. Like, I know how much money it's potentially going to cost. Like, if this is what it's going to be, this is terrible. Like, I was so fearful on the first weekend, day 1 and 2, that I actually on the second day snapped at the cinematographer. We did a take, and then I stopped production, and I was like, okay, I want to apologize to you, because this is not how I want my set to be run. I do not want people yelling at each other or speaking harshly to each other or being sarcastic to it. I want it to be a positive, fun environment, and I'm sorry that I took my anxieties out on you. And once we got over that first weekend, filming was a dream. It wasn't easy, but I learned some crucial lessons just in the first 2 days of filming. And I kind of was like, all right, we've done 2 days. Let's keep going. I can't stop now.
Oh, hats off to you, Andrew. First of all, it took an insane amount of courage and faith in yourself to pull the trigger, like you said. And I can totally relate as someone that even if I have the means to spend money on something, I still toil over it and do a ton of research on something. And then I end up in this like decision paralysis sort of mode where I just never decide to move forward. And I was relating so hard to what you were saying earlier about like something becomes real once you've made like it known to other people and you've kind of made this commitment to others. You feel like you have to uphold your end of the bargain. And for me, when I've made films, it's been that same thing where it's like, once I put it out into the universe, that's my way of holding myself accountable. So totally relate to all you're saying. And it's such a feat to shoot a film over weekends and working every night while holding a full-time job. If you could distill it down, do you have a few words of advice for anybody else based on the lessons you learned that is thinking about taking this approach to making a feature film?
You know what? I'm just going to say one thing. It was so crazy what we did. Like looking back on it now, and that's the thing. You have to put blinders on to get anything made because Beth Crudelli, who produced it, she and I are dating, and she moved in the week we started filming. And when I scheduled it, I thought to myself, let's start filming the movie in my apartment. Then that feels safe. It's a location I can kind of control. Like this will make me feel comfortable just to start the ball rolling on filming. Well, I never factored in that Beth would have all of her possessions in the apartment that would then take up all of the space of what we had production design. And Beth's car was the only car that was big enough to hold go and pick up the equipment. So Beth would load she would go pick up the equipment, bring it to the apartment. We would unload the equipment. We would then load up all of her possessions into her car. We would then film Saturday and Sunday, and then we would have to unload all of her possessions at like 11 p.m. at night, load up the equipment, drive it to Burbank to drop off, and then start the whole process over again. Because during the week, I was meeting with actors and rehearsing and doing rewrites, and sometimes a location would fall through and we'd have to go location scouting. And the fact that I don't know why, the loading and unloading of equipment just feels awful to me. When I look back, I think of those nights, like 2 a.m, loading up Beth's van with equipment, and that we did this for 3 months with almost no breaks. We had like a break for Christmas. I can't, and I was doing a full-time job on top of this. I'm not tooting my own horn. I was an insane person, and I'm sure I could do it again, but I have too much knowledge of what it took to do that. But to answer your question, the biggest lesson that I learned, and I learned it the first weekend, was that I needed to not rely on the vision in my head of what the movie looked like. I needed to go in with a plan, but then look at the elements that I had in front of me and utilize those. And that was what I kept bumping up against on the first weekend is I'm like, when I pictured this, probably was on, like the camera was on a jib arm and could swing around and create these really dynamic moves. And we had a slider and it looked boring. And I just kept trying to get that shot that I had in my head, and I couldn't do it with the equipment that I had in the space that I had because the apartment was too small. And it was like I just was hitting my head against the wall over and over and over again. And it took 2 days of doing that before I went, oh, maybe there's a better way of doing this. Maybe the scene can look actually even better than I originally pictured it if I just step back from that original vision and go, okay, well, what where is the light coming from? Where can we fit the camera? What can we do with this? And that became almost like a rallying cry for the rest of production. Like I almost would get excited when something didn't work, because then I'd have to be creative and find something better. And there was one moment in, a location fell through and our friend said, oh, you can use my apartment, my condo. was like, oh God, great. Thank you so much. I love you so much. Thank you for letting me film in your apartment. And in the script, the character runs down a hallway and then is chased through slips on spilled milk and falls down. And that's how they get captured by the evil entity. Well, we go to this condo and there's no hallway like that. And there's like an island in her kitchen. So like in order to slip on any milk, which sounds lame. Now that I'm hearing it out loud, I'm like, that sounds so stupid. She'd have to like go like around the island. Like it just didn't make any sense. So I'm like, okay, this scene doesn't make any sense that we're going to be filming tomorrow. And we basically looked around the apartment and we were like, okay, well, what can we do with this space? And she had like frosted windows on her door, like her doors, like to the bedrooms. And so we were like, well, wait, what if, the person is lurking behind the door and we just see the shadow of them and the person comes out and they don't notice. And then there's this whole sky and we just started acting out what would potentially happen and rewrote that whole moment, and is probably one of my favorite parts of the movie. Anything that we like stuck too close to my original vision kind of bores me. Anything where we like were improvising or coming up with like neat little tricks on set, those are always my favorite moments. And I think that was my biggest takeaway is you can't be rigid. You're making a movie. Sometimes you're going to have to just think outside the box in order to get what you're trying to get. And I say 9 times out of 10, what we came up with was better than the original idea. And that excited me. Every day on set, I was excited about the possibilities. Suddenly, showing up on set didn't mean that we were going to be compromising the original vision at every stage because we didn't have enough lights or the right equipment. Every day was an opportunity to make it even better and more thrilling than I could have ever dreamed.
Right. And if not the schedule, what would you say? I mean, you're talking about problem solving and how to address those challenges. And obviously the way you did this and on the budget and the availability you had made it challenging. But like, what was the biggest challenge, again, if not the schedule, in making Rod? Did anything kind of surprise you about making a feature that the shorts may not have prepared you for?
I think being the boss was new for me. Like I felt very uncomfortable that people relied on me for them to be able to pay rent. Like that never occurred to, because, I'm just like on all of my short films, it was, let's get together and make a movie. And it was like, it was all fueled by passion and the love of filming. And it didn't occur to me that when you are requiring people to devote that much of their lives to you, they need to be able to pay rent. And you're hiring people where that is their job. Their job is to, sound mix on set or, be a cinematographer or be a gaffer. Like that's their day job. So they can't do it for free or they'll never be able to survive. And having to be the boss in that way and like have people talk about me as the boss, made me a little uncomfortable at first because I was coming from a completely creative and passion side and the business side kind of creeps in. And I even had to do managerial things. Like an actress came to me and said, someone on the crew said this thing and it made me uncomfortable. And I had to be the one to pull the crew member aside and be like, this is unacceptable. Like, I understand maybe why you did it, but you cannot do that anymore. And kind of chastise people or, and not threaten, but be like, hey, like, if you do this again, like, I can't call you back. Like, I'm going to just have to find someone else because I can't have people come to my set and feel in danger. So these were all brand new experiences for me. I mean, I also, in the film, every project I make, I am attempting things that I've never done before. I had never worked with a monster, a creature effects shop before. I had never dealt with nudity in my projects. And that was one that I really wanted the cast to feel safe and to feel heard. And that took a lot of conversations before filming, where I explained to them why I wrote nudity into the script and how I was using the nudity. And it was not to be sexy, which, there's a place for sexy nudity, and that was not in this script. And that was also a big eye opener. And thankfully, all of the nudity filming in the movie went off without a hitch. Everyone treated it very respectfully. And to my knowledge, all of the actors felt comfortable. But these were new challenges that I had never dealt with before. Our nursing home was a huge location. We spent the entire production, months and months and months leading up to this massive nursing home location. And we were so used to everyone being in a contained area that as soon as we were in a big open environment, we didn't even think to get walkie-talkies because we were like, well, we'll text or something. But cell reception was not available at this location. And so suddenly we're having to run down hallways, calling out to people. A bunch of little lessons like that they would crop up, and I would be surprised and deal with it and be like, wow, why didn't we think of walkie-talkies? Why didn't we think of XYZ? And this is all part of the process of doing an indie project, is that you don't have a studio that has been making movies for a century or more, going, okay, this is we have kind of normal practices in place. And, if you're doing this, you should get this and this and this. We didn't have guidance like that. We went in very prepared, and even then we were unprepared in many ways.
I don't think you can ever be fully prepared, even when you got 100 years of experience in a studio behind you. There's always something that comes up. But I think those pieces of advice and little tidbits you shared were awesome. I am curious, you alluded to this a few times. I don't want to spoil anything, but you definitely take some major risks with the film at the end. On a whole, Rot is has this very grounded and naturalistic feel, and the performances are really low key. But they're stellar, by the way. So congratulations on those performances to you and your actors. Everyone is so believable and likable. But, at the end of the film, it just kind of goes off the rails in a different direction. Did it take some convincing, for your actors and your collaborators to kind of see your vision?
Yes. Actually, I had, I touched on this briefly, but I went through, I think it was 2 years. It was a year and a half of rewrites before I even got to the part where we're like, okay, let's start actually doing stuff and reaching out to people and getting a crew. I had gotten so much feedback by the time I even met with actors that I knew basically every terrible thing that you could say about the movie. And every question that anyone ever had, I had thought about. So getting feedback, and that's another thing I learned from film school, senior thesis. You present your thesis script and everyone in the class, one by one, shits on it. And then you cast it and they tear apart the actors you chose, and then you film it and they tear apart the dailies, and then you show them the first cut and they tear apart the first cut. And I feel like having thick skin really helps. And I had someone tell me the end of your movie sucks. It's terrible. You should change it. I would be mortified to make that and show my family. And I kind of always knew that the end was going to be what stood out to people, and that would make them talk. But I hate to sound vague because I am trying to not give away the ending, but there is, and what Becky said, I set out to make a horror film that took place in the real world. And that was kind of my driving mantra. And it's a shame because I think halfway through filming, I went, oh, I wish that maybe I had heightened it more. Maybe it was too in the real world, because I always had more fun doing the kind of heightened scenes. But the end of the movie, it takes a little bit of a leap. And I likened it when people pushed back on me and they said that kind of comes out of left field. I went, kind of, but they kind of do something similar in The Brood. And The Brood has kind of a left field ending. And I love The Brood. So I'm kind of that's kind of an influence on me. And I think I can pull this off. if I thread the needle correctly. And, only people who see the movie can tell me if I've pulled that off. I think I forgot your original question. Did I answer it or did I get sidetracked?
No, I think you did. And I think you ended it with a nice, hey, go watch my movie and tell me
yes.
if you think it works or not. No, and I think you answered. It's hard to answer in a lot of detail without, like you said, giving away the ending. So I totally get it. It's like it's talking in circles a little bit, but I feel like you still answered like the core of what I was asking about, which is like, how do you get people on board with a vision that might not be so commercial, or even just like, how do you come to terms with it yourself? So I think you answered that pretty well.
And I will say, like, there's a time to stick with your guns and there is a time to listen. And I definitely am a big believer in listening and also creating a space where people feel comfortable telling me to my face that it's bad. And I'm not saying any of those people are wrong. And there are times when I'm like, I'm glad I stuck to my guns. And there are times when I regret it. But we were very diligent about showing the film over and over and over again to our friends, to strangers, just getting people to tell us what they thought of the movie. And I did some reshoots. I cut things out that I loved because it wasn't working for the movie that people were watching. And I think that it all goes back to being adaptable. And it's so frustrating as a filmmaker. You edit, you spend years working on this. You know everything so intimately, and then you show an audience member and a character will look at someone a certain way, and the audience will fill in all of this information that you have no control over. And they're like, oh, that person has a thing for the other person. And they're like trying to undermine her boyfriend. And you're like, what? But no. And they're like, well, but what about that look? And you're like, shoot, like things that I never would have been able to think of became constant hurdles for me to get over in order to convey the movie that I wanted to convey and have people understand it. And some of that was just taking things out, taking out what I thought were fun little details, bogged it down and confused people. And it wasn't until the whole film was edited and sound designed and color corrected, the titles were all in, and we were watching it in front of an audience that I was like, oh, crap. I know exactly how to fix this. I shouldn't say this now that I'm trying to get people to watch it on Amazon, but it's as soon as it's all laid out in front of you, suddenly you see so clearly what you could have done to make your life as a storyteller easier. And I think that may just be part of the frustrating process. I guess unless you get to a certain level where you're making movies and you're like, yeah, I'm the best filmmaker ever. Until you get to that point, deciding when a movie is done, sometimes if you're like me, you just keep working at it until you're exhausted and you literally cannot do anything else. At every stage, I knew we were done filming when I went out and was filming pickup shots that I would get back and not even load into the editing software. Cause I'm like, I'm not going to use these. Like, okay, I guess I'm done filming because all of everything that I shot for the last hour, I'm not going to use. Okay, I'm going to keep editing. As soon as I get to the point where I'm just like trimming a frame here or there, it's like, well, obviously I'm done editing. I can't think of anything else to improve this by. But then you sit down in the theater and suddenly it is so crystal clear what you needed to change. But it literally, you'd have to take a time machine back to when you wrote the script. So it's kind of like, okay, well, I've learned my lesson and I need to look ahead to the next project and not make those mistakes. I'll make all new mistakes. And I look forward to it.
Or, you could just be George Lucas and
tinker till you die. Yeah.
Yeah, but those never work. You tinker and then you release it and everyone's like, I liked the theatrical version better.
Exactly.
Except for Ridley Scott, who somehow I don't know if it's magic or what.
I was about to say the same thing. He's one of the few exceptions that you could argue a couple of his director's cuts are truly monumentally better than theatrical versions.
Does anyone watch the theatrical version of Blade Runner and prefer that? I'm sure some people do, but I think majority of people know and love Blade Runner from the 2007 cut. Is that the director's cut? I don't remember.
I believe that was director's, and then there was the final cut, which was one more edition that he did. I forget what year that came out.
Yeah.
Not to tangent onto him, but like Kingdom of Heaven is a completely different movie if you see his roadshow version versus the theatrical. And in fact, it makes it much better, in my opinion.
I do need to see his director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven, because I liked the theatrical cut when I saw it. I was like, oh yeah, that was pretty good. Like I didn't love it enough to ever watch it again, but I'm very curious about the director's cut.
Well, if you like the theatrical version, you were like, what happened to that guy that was only on screen for a minute? He's a pretty big name actor. Well, he's in the director's cut.
Oh, okay.
Happened to a few of those folks. But, fast forwarding to the part where, the film is in the can, you see all the seams. We wanted to ask, on the closing part of this is selling the film. How did you go about, finding distribution? Was it hard to, find the right fit given the craziness of the ending? Was that a hard part of the sell?
That wasn't a hard part of the sell of getting a distributor. That was a hard part of getting it onto Amazon. Yeah, which I was a little disappointed by. So what is on Amazon is a slightly modified version of the end. I don't want to say censored, but it's tweaked so that Amazon would accept it. No, I think because it is so indie and so set in the real world and not flashy at the beginning, that was kind of a hard sell. And I think that even for viewers, again, I should not say this on a podcast where I'm like, you should go see my movie, but it's a slow burn. And I was so passionate about it taking place in the real world. I think that turns some people off. I think maybe some people would accuse me of being afraid of genre. And I don't know. I think it looks way more expensive than it was. And I am so proud of all of the actors and all of the crew members that helped out. And if there is anything wrong with the film, or if there is something you don't like about the movie, totally my fault. Totally my fault. Because everyone else gave 110% and really brought it. But yeah, I think that was the biggest thing, is that I didn't add a lot of extraneous colors to the movie. I didn't, it wasn't like, I also didn't want to make like, oh, this is a 70s movie. I just wanted to make a movie that I was proud of, and that was my vision. I didn't want to emulate anyone. And I think if I did emulate someone and I did make it like, oh, it looks retro and 70s, I think the style would have leapt out a little bit clearer, like in trailers and stuff. And I think people would have been like, oh, it's like a 70s slow burn. Okay. And they would have understood it. And I think the film keeps its characters in the dark for so long that it's kind of hard to explain it in a trailer. And I think if I was going, for my next project, I am seriously thinking about, well, what is the trailer going to look like for this? Like, what is the log line for when I pitch this to people? And I'm hopefully not going to make the same mistake next time. I hope that, like, if the log line's boring, then maybe I'm focusing on the wrong aspect of the story. And, maybe I need to, as much as I hate log lines and hate like pitching, I think I need to focus on that, because it focuses the story. As soon as you're like, oh, yeah, I do want to watch that movie. Well, whatever that log line is, that movie is not going to allow for a lot of, meandering in the wrong direction. If it's a clear story, you're going to have to stay on track. And I'm working to reel myself in some ways and kind of focus a little bit more. Work on the marketing before I make the movie.
I think that's smart. I know one mistake I made with a film is that it was hard to market because the twist ending was probably the most interesting thing about it. But if I marketed the twist ending, then I'd be giving away the twist ending. I can totally relate.
The same problem that I have now, right? Like the flashiest part of the movie is the end of the movie that I don't want to show people.
Yep. Exactly. So I think it's smart, and I think you can do it in a way where you're not compromising your vision as an artist by thinking about marketing. I think you can take a log line or whatever it might be as kind of like a thesis and to help you stay on track, and to think of like, when I read that, what are the things that I think of, what would excite me about this premise, and make sure you're delivering on that. You know, there's still obviously ways to be creative and surprise people outside of that. But at its core, yeah, it's definitely a good way to think about, like, what would a trailer look like? What would a poster look like for this movie, as a way to kind of help guide your storytelling process?
Well, because then you're also helping the people who are trying to sell the movie and make money. And, you know, hopefully it makes the film more eye-catching. And it's easy to be like, well, they'll get it when they see it. But if no one is seeking it out because they don't understand what the hell the movie is, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. And then, you know, and this goes back to lying to yourself. I convinced myself, all right, I'll, you know, spend this money, but like, I'll be able to like make it back really fast. And that is not the case. I may never make back the money I spent on this, but I made it, and I am so much better as a filmmaker and a storyteller because of it that I have zero regrets.
It's a good way to wrap the interview proper part of it then.
Exactly.
No, we love a lot of those answers. And of course, you know, compounding on each film, you're learning more, and I'm sure the next one will go smoother, but present brand new challenges you also never thought of. So we look forward to seeing where you go with it. So what we'll move into next is the second half of this called the Rapid Fire 15, which we always joke is neither rapid nor really fire, but there are 15 questions. We try to tailor them to your tastes and what we learned about you, even as recently as this interview. So we've changed some on the fly as we do. So don't overthink this. I know that's hard to do based on everything we have learned about you. But just, it's not a cool test. You're not getting graded on it. It's just the first thing that comes to mind, you know, simple stuff like some favorite types of movies or favorite movie by a director. So
I'm already overthinking you saying that I overthink. Oh my God. What am I conveying to people? I hate this.
Now you've heard a couple, so you'll kind of know what we're asking. It's nothing,
all right.
Nothing too crazy.
I'm ready.
Everyone gets the most nervous for this section, I swear. All right. So starting off, what movie do you think you have seen the most in your life?
Probably E.T. the Extraterrestrial.
All right, and that's not a bad
answer. Is that rapid fire enough for you?
That was perfect.
Plenty.
That was
plenty.
Wow. Ones.
If it's not the same, but that's okay if it is, what would be your ultimate comfort movie, like your anytime, anywhere, warm blanket film, if not E.T.?
I don't know if I watch, because I've seen this online. I don't think I watch movies like that. Like, I like to preserve the magic. I don't watch movies over and over and over again. I like to let a few years go by before I watch them again, so that I'm surprised and I discover new things, and like nothing feels like there are films that I know the back of my hand. Like, I know Jurassic Park, I know Jaws so well, but I try and space them out every few years I want to keep that magic. I never want to watch a movie and like it's lost that spell over me. I'm not someone who can do laundry very easily and watch a movie because I keep watching the movie. I can't, people that are like, I put on Avengers for the 20th time as I cleaned the apartment. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, if you loved the Avengers, I would think you'd want to keep it like special. I don't know.
No, I totally get it and don't disagree with what you're saying. I usually would have to pay attention to something. I don't watch anything passively. I hear people that like rewatch Scrubs and The Office 15 times. I'm like, how do you do that?
It would probably have to be like a TV show or something that I had watched a billion times. But like, even then, it always disappoints me. It always disappoints me that I've watched the pilot of Arrested Development too many times, because just like grabbing friends and being like, you have to see this. And it has lost a little bit of that magic because I've just seen it too many times.
I think that's one of my favorite answers to this question. So I like it. Yeah, even if it's breaking form a bit, I like it.
Yeah, I just, especially comedy, you never want to like hear a joke and then even like you even know how long the beat is before the punchline comes. And like, I Man, it almost sounds like I'm more into one night stands with movies than long-term committed relationships. But I swear, I have so much love for these movies, and I don't want to make them cheap.
Totally fair.
Yeah. You heard it here first. His favorite comfort movie is One Night Stand starring Wesley Snipes.
Yeah, nice.
Totally different direction. What is your favorite horror movie franchise?
You know what? Franchise? Probably Friday the 13th, because I actually bought that box set.
Same.
I don't think, like, I love Halloween more than any of the Friday the 13th movies, but there are not that many good Halloween sequels. And I think Nightmare on Elm Street is maybe the more creative in terms of kills and stuff, but it seems like it's so confined to the format. And what I love about Friday the 13th is they could really play around with the series. At least it felt like it in terms of, yes, the kills were the same, but it felt like they tried things with the sequels. And I kind of appreciated that they let it go in weird ways. And yeah, so I think Friday the 13th. What other horror series? I'm trying to think of like other big ones. Like I just watched Psycho 2 and 3, and I was actually really surprised by how good Psycho 2 was and how I thought it complemented the first movie really well. But like that is such a gross movie in terms of like just uncomfortableness. Like I would never say that I loved sitting down and watching Psycho. Like I don't want to, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I love the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Do I love it enough to want to like live in that world and like, is it fun? It's like, it terrifies me, but like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 exhausts me. It's like too much. And so I think Friday the 13th.
No, you can't go wrong with that answer. And in fairness, though, if Scream Factory were to put out as good a set of all the ones we've named that they did for Friday the 13th, I think we'd all still buy them. Because they really put some TLC into that awesome box.
Oh, yes.
Which I think all of us on this call have.
I actually I held out because I was like, that's a lot of money and I don't know. And then, I did my first drunken Amazon purchase. I bought that and the Bergman box set. This is someone who, again, hems and haws about spending $50, and then you put a couple of drinks in me, and I finally was like, you know what? I have this gift card for $30, and then
I love that. I love that so much.
Next up, do you have a favorite Universal monster and/or favorite Universal monster movie?
A few years ago, I would have said Bride of Frankenstein was my favorite, but I definitely think The Invisible Man is my new favorite. The original Invisible Man is so funny and then just flies into crazy town so fast. I love it to death. And I love the new one because it actually is exploring themes and like has something to say and it is like the perfect adaptation. And I hope they do something like that with Bride of Frankenstein. Get a female filmmaking team to make Bride of Frankenstein, because I think that they are going to find a fascinating story in there. But Invisible Man, oh my God, that scene where they call the policeman over and he goes up into the room and the policeman, like, his jaw drops because the guy's like taking off his headband and he's invisible and everyone's screaming and he's going, as he runs around the room. And then it hard cuts to the policeman after they run down the stairs. It hard cuts to him at the bar going, well, his problem's he's invisible. And they're like, what? They just came to that conclusion so fast. And then they're like, well, we better go up there and stop him from getting naked because we'll never find him. Like, it's just so bonkers and it happens so fast. And they're running around what I assume is the Universal backlot, which looks incredible. My roommate got me the whole box set and I've only seen the first two. So I'm excited to continue checking out the Invisible Man series.
I can totally see how that fits into your sensibilities, from the comedic perspective. So not surprised by that answer.
Super fun.
What is your favorite David Cronenberg movie?
I'd probably have to say The Fly would be my favorite.
Yeah, no, there's plenty of correct answers for that.
But I love his newer stuff as well. A Dangerous Method. I love that movie. His non-horror fare is equally as great. A History of Violence. It took a while for me to warm up to, but I love that now, and I think it's great. It's just, its structure's a little bit different than I expected. I love The Brood, obviously. Love Videodrome. Yeah, I think The Fly, hands down.
Can't argue. At least this favorite goes. You've name-checked several of this man's films, more than once on this show, so I'm curious if it's E.T. or otherwise. But what is your favorite Spielberg movie?
I mean, it's E.T. It's E.T. But I'm the Spielberg dork that I have my Spielberg ranking, and I have them broken up into A for outstanding, A- for almost perfect, B, and I continually go and update it and rearrange them, and I have different colors for the ones that I've seen on the big screen. So yeah, I'm a big Spielberg dork. I love that man. I love his movies. I love watching the movies that no one talks about and being just bowled over by how incredible they are. Like, no one talks about The Color Purple. And, I watched it in high school and was like, oh yeah, that's a good movie. And then I watched it again recently and I ugly cried so hard that I was glad that I was alone, because I was embarrassed by how hard I was crying by myself.
That's funny. I just saw it for the first time in the last decade as well, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, this movie's great. Why did I never watch this? I think just because subject matter as a kid, I was like, that seems boring or something. But it was just one that missed me for years and years.
So many of his movies. I even like Always. I haven't seen it in a while, but I liked Always. And it's so amazing to watch him take a scene that nowadays people would just try and get through the scene as quickly as possible. And he goes, no, let's try and mine this scene as much as possible and make it something. Let's add some fun details and, create some interesting camera movement, get the characters moving around the scene. This is a movie that people think is terrible. There is a scene that starts with a 740, a big giant airliner flying overhead, and it pans and tilts, looking up through this window, landing on John Goodman talking on the phone, and it's a real plane. It's none of it's CG. And it's just a little detail that elevates all of his work. He's just so good. He's so good.
No disagreements.
So Andrew, what would be your dream project to direct? So let's say story rights or budget. None of those things were an issue. You could do whatever you wanted. What's your dream project?
Well, right now, I actually, for the first time in my professional filmmaking career, have sat down to start writing a script without budgetary concerns in mind. And it is so fun. And the script is about, it's actually, and this is kind of jumping off of Friday the 13th. I've never seen a horror film that captures the spirit of summer camp. Friday the 13th, a lot of it deals with the before camp really gets up and running. Maybe Sleepaway Camp does a pretty good job, but I really wanted to capture that feeling of camp, and so I have written a movie that I kind of pitching it to people. I'm kind of it's like The Goonies meets Alien. And it's a kind of monster movie set at a summer camp. But I'm really working to try and get in that feeling of being at camp. But I think that I've hit a wall, and I think that I'm realizing why these horror movies kind of lean away from the camp aspect so quickly is because it's hard to maintain that horror in a summer camp. So, maybe it's impossible. Maybe I'm going to crack the code, but I've been having a hell of a good time writing it.
That sounds really fun. Andrew, we should connect because this is kind of one of my areas of expertise, largely in the slasher domain, but I think it can connect easily to monster movies. But there's maybe a few movies I could suggest for you that may help, that maybe break the mold a little bit with the summer camp, and maybe we'll just open up some ideas. Even if they're in the slasher realm, they might still kind of help since it sounds like you're doing something totally different.
I would love that. All the help I need. But I think part of my problem is that I almost see it, and I grappled with this on Rod, is like I see it almost as like part Terrence Malick, part Goonies. And it's like those two styles do not mesh. And I'm like trying to think like, but how do I make them mesh? Like, how do I do this where I feel like I'm simultaneously hanging out at this summer camp with these kids, and I feel like I'm being transported back to this the heat of summer, people going down to the water hole and hanging out and going and having ice cream and then sitting around the campfire and, singing songs and going back to the counselor cabin and goofing off with your friends as everyone's getting into their sleeping bags. How do I capture that feeling and transport an audience there and not undermine the horror aspect? And it's like, I looked at Jaws a lot because I feel like Jaws does a great job of capturing the flavor of the town, even though halfway through they leave the town, they leave the island at the halfway point. So I'm struggling, but I'm always open to movie suggestions. And I feel like I'm going to get it like 70% there, and then a better writer than me is going to need to come in and save it. I don't know.
In a sort of related question, because you said capturing that moment and that time and that place, what would be the craziest idea that you'd love to see turned into a film one day? Or what is your craziest idea that you can give away?
I'm hoping it's my next one. I started writing this 11 years ago, and every couple of years I pull out the script and I tear it apart and I do a rewrite. There's something there, and it's something that I think I can afford. I can't afford it now, but I think it could be done in a manageable budget. It's got technically 3 characters, the whole movie, kind of contained, kind of like Misery if Charlie Kaufman wrote it. And it's about this kid who is hired to house sit for some strangers, and he doesn't realize that there is something or someone in the house with him. And it goes off in very weird directions. And even now I'm trying to work on this camp monster movie that I'm never going to be able to afford. I keep coming up with ideas for this film because I know that there's something there, and it's so weird and fun. And I think that all of the performances could be it could attract some great actors. And I have been thinking about this movie so long that I really want to make it. I hope I can make it next. I did a 5-year plan, and I hope to film it within a year. Start getting it up and running. 2022, making the movie.
Well, keep at it. I'm excited. You took the initiative to just pull the trigger with Rot. So anything is possible.
I hope so. I really would love to get to a point where I never have to come up with more ideas for this film. Although I probably will. Maybe it's that one story that I'll just keep maybe I should have had them do this even after I film it. But I hope that someday I can feel that pain of, I can't change this ever again because I've already made it.
If we could be so lucky to be in that position. Now, okay, we're going to take this in a totally different direction away from movies. What is your all-time favorite video game? Or a video game franchise?
I have to say it's BioShock. I love that series so much. But also I love the Elder Scrolls. I love the Elder Scrolls so much, and I am so ready for Elder Scrolls 6. I can't even tell you. I just want to be able to wander off into a mountain and stumble upon a ruined castle, and fight zombies. I love the Elder Scrolls so much. I think I just admitted that I like walking simulators, and just put me in a world and I'll just look at the grass blowing in the wind.
Hey, we get it. The real world can be very disappointing, so why not escape into other worlds?
Yeah.
Says Filmmakers.
Yeah.
Fellow San Fernando resident like myself, what is your favorite thing about living in California, or specifically Southern California?
I grew up in California in the Bay Area, and Northern California and Southern California are very different. They're like 2 different states. I love Northern California so much. My friends live in Santa Cruz, and we go to Santa Cruz, and I get to live my little hippie dreams for a weekend. And there's just something about the Bay Area that is magical to me. And I'm sad that I can never afford to live there. Southern California was a kind of a shock to the system at first. And I don't know why, because it is very similar, but in different, it's like subtle ways it's different. And it took me a while to fall in love with Los Angeles. And now I love Los Angeles. Los Angeles is one of those cities where whatever you want, they have. Whatever weird, quirky thing you're into, Los Angeles has. Your people are there. It's just hard to find them sometimes, or at least it was for me. So I love Los Angeles, and I love the food scene here. But we're kind of in a weird time where, like, when the pandemic ends, I'm going to be curious what makes it through on the other side. And in some places, it's going to be really heartbreaking. Like, oh, this famous coffee shop that was there forever is gone now.
Cafe 101?
Yeah.
I didn't know if that was the one you were referencing, but that's happened to too many shops here.
I was thinking of that. I was also thinking about the 4 and 20, where they filmed Parks and Rec.
Yes.
I know they filmed in 2 different 4 and 20s. I think the main one is like a block away, and that's gone. And I didn't hear anyone say anything about it. It was just like one day the sign was removed, and I was like, I went there with friends maybe 2 or 3 times a year, but it's nice to have those places around.
I hear you. I think about this a lot every day. What's going to be left at the end of the day when we can finally start returning to bars and restaurants? But now I'm going to switch to a topic that's very important. Are you a cat or a dog person?
I'm a dog person, and I got my very first dog during the pandemic, and the dog is like a cat. He is not affectionate, really. And he's a little bit, but he's definitely like very focused on what he wants to do, and he wants to just have someone throw a tennis ball for him to chase. And he's so focused on that you can talk excitedly to him, you can try and give him affection. He will move away from you so that his eye line is not broken, so that he can keep looking at the toy and making sure it doesn't move, because if it moves, he's going to chase it. So a dog person, but yeah, I've been cursed with a cat dog, and I love him so much.
Speaking of furry little creatures, who is your favorite Muppet?
This is a really important question, so I do not want to speak hastily. I don't want to say Kermit. That's too easy. Ooh, this is...
This is what stumps him, Becky.
Oh, boy. I mean...
I'm sorry, I'm just laughing at the fact that this is the one that you've taken the most time to respond to.
Okay, I think I know. I mean, Beaker is great. I love Beaker, but... there's a character that showed up in the Jason Segel Muppet movie that I had never seen before. And it is this awkwardly large blue Muppet. I don't even know his name, but he does not have a speaking role. He is part of the main Muppet troupe. And I think he actually is in all of the Muppet TV show intros, the Muppet Show intros. It's time to start the music. And he comes in and he's just like a big lumbering blob, like circular big blob.
Gotcha. I do know who you're talking about.
And I think he's got like big floppy ears that like raise up when he's excited. I think that's my favorite Muppet. And I'm ashamed to say that there are certain Muppets that still scare me. And I rewatched the first Muppet movie again recently, and it's got some scary and, dare I say, fucked up shit in it. And I love it all the more for that. Those early Muppet movies, those Muppets are dirty. They look worn down. I mean, they look like they've seen some shit and can somehow still sing about it. So, the Muppets, they're a treasure. And the fact that Disney is not just doing Muppet book adaptations every year is an astoundingly stupid business decision. I know that they are making, they're literally hitting home runs for everything. Everything they touch is turning to gold right now. So, it's hard to say Disney's being stupid, but Muppet Christmas Carol, one of my favorites. Every year I watch it. And that actually what to me was the Muppets for the longest time. And I liked Muppet Treasure Island. Like, just find a book, make it with Muppets. Like, how hard is
right?
Like,
that's with the original show now being on Disney Plus. Maybe you should all go watch it so that Disney will realize there is an audience for exactly that.
Well, I just want to say Disney has heard the fans, and they are finally releasing the Love Is Found edition of the Muppet Christmas Carol. So
it's the lost song.
Thank you, Disney, for going into the archives and finding the print and doing a remaster. And I hope that you make it look beautiful, and I will buy it as soon as you release it on Blu-ray or 4K, whichever is the higher resolution format.
Well, two things. I have a VHS version that does contain it, but like you said, it's not remastered. And two, Becky does not like the Muppets, so this is torture for her, so we will move on.
Hold on.
Or we will not.
I just find them very uncomfortable. It's kind of what you were talking about earlier, though. Like, I love horror movies, so obviously, like, scary things don't bother me. I just don't like looking at them. I just don't like it.
Hey, but like, you know what? You find the beauty in life by going through a scary journey with these sometimes scary puppets.
Yeah, I guess I do that with other things, but not the Muppets. Maybe I'll rewatch it and try and find a newfound appreciation if I can make it through.
It's you know what? It's tough to recreate the magic of the Muppets. I will say this. I will give Disney some slack that the Muppets really rely on the performers bouncing off of each other. And those original performers were so good at just improvising and reacting and like they were good actors. And now they have the problem of finding actors that sound like the original actors, but then also are good improvisers and then also work well with the other actors that sound like the original actors for the other characters. Like it is a really, like they almost need to just start over with new Muppets and then just have the main people be side characters that show up every once in a while. But like, it's tough. Like you see those early movies and so much of it relies on, actually, I just watched Cobra for the first time and seeing those like small moments where Stallone just like riffs with his co-stars, it kind of feels like that. Like there's a magic to something happened unexpectedly but they're all in it, all so in the moment and in character that they can bounce off of each other and you have no idea what is going to happen next. So
well, now you're speaking my language, bringing up Cobra. I love Cobra. I've never heard anyone compare it to the Muppets. That's a first.
Stallone, he's got that like, and he did this with Rocky too. Like all of the big moments, I'm kind of like, okay, but like those little moments where he just starts like bullshitting with the other characters and you're like, wow, he's good at this. Like it's like no wonder he is he is Stallone, right? Like,
yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel about the original Muppet movies is like you see those moments where they just like riff and play in character or like something unexpected happens and you can tell that like the performer was caught off guard because like the Muppet is caught off guard and then the Muppet will like say a little like mutter a little offhanded joke and it's amazing. It's magic. And this is why we go to those the movies is these magic moments.
You know what else is magic? Ice cream. What is your favorite flavor of ice cream or your favorite ice cream treat? Like if it's a banana split or milkshake or whatever.
Yes, I am an ice creamaholic. So I feel like this question is a little insensitive because I'm trying to abstain and, lose some weight around my belly section. So thank you for tapping into this trauma.
You're welcome. You're very welcome.
Man, this is a curse because people know that I love ice cream so much that people keep getting me ice cream makers. I have 3 ice cream makers. No one needs 3 ice cream makers. It is a curse. Favorite ice cream. The 2 that come to mind, I know are purely nostalgia flavors. I like Baskin Robbins mint chocolate chip ice cream, and I like, this ice cream store doesn't really exist anymore, but there was an ice cream store in the Bay Area, whose name I can't even remember. they would make a Java coffee ice cream that was, even as a kid, and I didn't like coffee, I loved coffee ice cream milkshakes. I get mint chip on a cone, coffee milkshake. But I make ice cream now, and I made a lavender chocolate ice cream, like lavender ice cream with like chocolate flakes. That was incredible. I made a mint chocolate chip ice cream with like real mint, not like artificial flavoring or colors. That was so good. I've made some really good ice creams. I made a pumpkin ice cream. I do that every Halloween. I make a pumpkin ice cream. Yeah, I like making ice cream, but I definitely eat too much of it and have to like pump the brakes.
Relatable.
Yeah. What I'm trying to say is ice cream is a gift that was given to us by the gods or by just divine intervention, the universe, the stars aligning. It is everything good that you can put in your mouth.
Almost done here. What would be Andrew Merrill's walk-up music? Like if you were coming out for a TED Talk or to showcase your brand new movie, what's the music that's playing you out?
I guess, you know, if you're a filmmaker, right? Like the dream is that you've made so many iconic movies with scores, and I'm thinking of Spielberg, that, you know, you could get something from your own films to play you up onto stage. And I mean, Spielberg's lucky he has John Williams. I want that. That's
a good answer.
He's not working a lot these days. Maybe you'll get a Zimmer or one of his proteges.
Actually, someone who, the Josie who composed for Rod, worked for Hans Zimmer, and that's how I met her. She was like I don't remember what her title was, but I worked at Fox Studios, and it was like my last week, and I was like, you know what? I want to go see the scoring stage on the Fox lot. And you know what? What are they going to do? Fire me? It's my last week. So I went onto the lot, and I went to the scoring stage and talked my way in, and they were scoring Hidden Figures. And I didn't know what they were. You know, I walked in, and it was a movie I'd never seen before, obviously. And Josie was there, like, setting out, like, sandwiches and stuff. And this was 2015. This was like right before I started writing the movie. And then fast forward years later, I remembered running into her, and I remembered that she was a composer, and I reached out. So that technically that happened.
Awesome.
That's an awesome coincidence, or like, you know, serendipitous moment. All right. Last question in the rapid fire section. So what is the thing you're looking forward to doing once the COVID restrictions have lifted, quarantining is behind us, and you can just go out and do whatever it is you want to do? What are you most looking forward to?
Every year, I rent a couple of campsites and invite all of my close friends, and we go out, and it's just car camping. Basically, as soon as restrictions are lifted and it's safe, I want to go backpacking with a big group of friends.
That sounds so fun. And maybe that'll be something you can do sooner as opposed to other things that might take a bit longer to do, because at least that's an outdoor activity.
It's an outdoor activity, but like, and we did a camping trip last summer when the numbers were still low, and just like coordinating with everyone and being like, okay, bring your own silverware and plates, and like you're in charge of cleaning your own stuff, and like we'll have one group cook the meal for everyone and like scoop it onto their plates, and like just trying to like figure that out in nature was difficult. And it, like everything COVID related, that little bit of hindrance kind of dampened some parts of it for me. But I agree, like I think a backpacking trip would be the safest. I never want a friend to catch it and have that like inkling of doubt, like, oh, could I have passed it to them? You know, I want to avoid that as much as possible. And I think that would be a terrible way to end a camping trip, is to 2 weeks later find out that, oops, you know, the guy from Los Angeles, the really terrible place where COVID is raging, spread out to a bunch of his friends. That would make me sad.
No, I totally get it. That's prevented me from doing a few things too.
Is this how we're going to end the podcast, on a bummer?
No.
No. No, you're gonna tell the folks what you have coming up next or what's in store. I know you haven't been able to say too much about it, but do you have some stuff on the horizon?
Yeah, so one, Rot, out on Amazon VOD. Check it out. Two, I have the House Sitter script that I actually I've been getting so many ideas for. I'm kind of excited to dive into it again. And I'm thinking of using that maybe to submit to the Universal Writers Workshop. I think that a program like that has always interested me, and I love the idea of getting a mentor, a professional mentor. I would love that. So I'm going to be trying for that, still working on this counselor script, and I have set a goal to write 2 new features this year, but I do not know what those are. But I want a couple of stories on paper, even in a rough state, so that I'm never lost. You know, that dreaded question when you finish a film, oh, what's next? I want to always have an answer for that. And thankfully, I feel like I do have things to work on. So I'm, I guess, one of the lucky ones, or I don't know.
Awesome. So if people want to follow you, do you have places on social media that you direct them to, or a website that we can refer people to check out your work?
You could follow me on Twitter, AJ Alberghetti, although I'm not like a vocal person on Twitter. I just kind of like and retweet a bunch of things. I'm there every day, but I'm not, very rarely feel like I have something like really brilliant to say that, oh my God, the masses have to hear this. And then you can follow me on Instagram, but that's also more like just photos of my dog and ice cream I've made and fun mountains I'm climbing. So, yeah, nothing, as you can tell, the 2 things that you need to survive in this industry, a social presence and a business savvy and a way to just generate tons of money for people to shower you with and make your projects. I lack all of those. So, it's going to be a long, difficult ride. It's going to be fun.
I can relate. So I love it. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. This has been a pleasure to catch up with you and hear a bit about the process of making Rot. It sounded like it was such a challenging endeavor, but I'm so glad you pushed through it, and really excited to see what you have cooking in those scripts over the coming year. Maybe they'll be on screen next year. So yeah, we'll keep an eye out for those developments.
Yeah, maybe we'll be watching them on a screen at a festival as we talked about together. So,
and who knows, maybe we'll all make something together in the future.
I'd love that.
I would as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, and we will be following you online.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. I really appreciated you reaching out. And I thought this was super fun. It was hard not just asking you guys questions as well. It felt weird just talking the whole time.
No. You have 90 seconds. Shoot. What do you want to ask?
Yeah. Well, like what, and maybe this is on the website, what made you guys want to start the podcast?
Ooh,
like what was
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a couple different things. So the Paper Street crew who did, Scare Package and Camera Obscura, they reached out to me because I think they were thinking about starting a podcast really as like a community building element, as well as just a mechanic for sharing the success and helping out like friends in the industry. So when we weren't joking when we were saying we actually like plugs, because that's a big part of what we want to do is promote our friends' work and really help kind of foster that sense of community, especially within the genre. And then really like we thought that there's a ton of podcasts about movies, but not a lot of them are about how did you actually make this movie? Like, what are the steps you took to, finance it, or how did you build up the courage to make it yourself? And so we really wanted to dive into those elements and focus on, some of the things you don't learn in film school, like we talked about. Sean, I don't know if you want to add anything else.
I'm sorry, our 90 seconds is up. No. Yeah, what Becky said, of course, beyond, being genre independent, kind of that been the positivity and inclusivity in the genre community was a big factor. But yeah, like she said, deep dives into just every aspect of production that we don't really hear enough of, from financing, from distribution, and everything in between. So we're still kind of mining that. We're trying to find, guests that maybe have a specialty in it too, or some aspect of production we haven't covered yet. But we've also talked to just a handful of obviously independent filmmakers too. So it's always good to hear like the way you guys all did your own versions of Robert Rodriguez's 10-minute film school, like what kind of filmmaking hacks,
Yeah, let's make sure we connect again not too long. And next time I'm down in LA, whenever I can do that, I'll let you know so can meet up.
Well, we've made plans. So September, Fantastic Fest 2021.
Exactly.
It's all in person. We're going to be in Austin. Like, COVID's ended. We're going to be able to hug and we need to. It's like I need to get back in the community and just like feel the energy and excitement of everyone creating and talking about movies and, analyzing each other's work and like feeding off of each other and get excited to just like go out and do it again. And, because you make a movie and you're just like exhausted and like you're like, oh my God, that was like terrifying and I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I'm going to ever make money back. And like I'm getting to the point where I'm like, screw it, let's do it again. It was fun.
The sickness of film. It is a sickness.
Yeah. Yep. It really is.
Yes, what Becky said, we do appreciate the time and all the candid answers, and we appreciate you being on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on and letting me talk about Rot and not cutting me off. You let me ramble, and I appreciate that.
Anytime.
On Amazon Prime now, guys. Check out Rot.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Take care.
Take care, Andrew.